This panel stream that was just discussed is organized specifically now by Swiss Cognitive. We thank the event organizers, the hosts, and Swiss Cognitive for making this possible. Ladies and gentlemen around the world, before the introduction of our distinguished panelists, I will make short remarks, or at least try to make them shorter than usual. We are in the age of AI, or the new electricity, and the driver of the fourth industrial revolution, and most recently, Society 5.0. Science fiction would have us believe that AI will take the form of intelligent creatures, and media show the real job displacement has and will occur as a result of AI adoption. AI is the topic of presidential debates, G20, dinner table conversations. For many, represent the existential threat to humanity. But is it? Digitalization was already an unstoppable tool for rapid scaling and increasing profitability before coronavirus pandemic. Now we are during the COVID-19 awful, dreadful pandemic, and it's a wake-up call for all of us to go digital. This is why this panel is so important. Coronavirus pandemic shifted this digital imperative into even higher gear. Eloquently stated in a speech, April 2020, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said, "We have seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months." The World Economic Forum, which is also represented on this panel and in this event, predicted by 2025, humans will make up only 48% of the workforce. The digital workforce accounts for 52%. In addition, 50% of the current S&P 500 companies will fall off the list by 2027. This is the transformation, reestablishing our economic markets, societal networks as we emerge from the current crisis. Let's discuss education. I live in the United States, closer to New York. Only 45% of high schools across the country offer computer science, never mind AI. Unacceptable, because AI education has traditionally only been available in advanced technical degrees, which are often not very diverse. AI practitioners are not representative of the broader population and are not getting through our students, our educators, and others. For example, only 14% of AI researchers around the world are women of any race. In short, an understanding of AI in practice of that traditionally been available to very few. STEM, data science, AI are fields in which women are vastly underrepresented. And the number drops when observing number of women pursuing university degrees. 55% of university graduates are female, but only a little over a third of those degrees are in STEM. This is what we need to change. We know that COVID-19 necessitates shift from classroom to remote. We'll talk a little bit about it today. Recent piece. If you haven't read it, read it. Generals die in bed. Op-ed was disturbing for those who are in the higher education, but it raises some questions. What it said is, even the best designed online experiences cannot compare to the well-designed and executed face-to-face class. That will allow for the best kind of online teaching, where with the technology we could live synchronously in real time. New York Times summarized it very well. After the spring's on-the-fly experiment in online classes, teachers and school districts across the United States were suffering. Some districts stumbled, with classrooms Zoom-bombed, interrupted, many strained to address serious inequalities in access to computers, and students fell behind. We need to go mainstream with digital education. We'll discuss it today. It would require a major reorientation of classroom and university resources and activities. Classrooms will need to be fitted with new technology so the lectures could be simultaneously delivered to the campuses and around the world. Professors need to undergo training on how to effectively teach in a hybrid blended classrooms. Universities would also be well served to build competencies in content production, because it's all content storytelling. This is what we're doing today. By tapping the best rated professors to be the stars of those productions, the equation could be changed. Finally, we will today discuss proactively engaging our kids as our partners our partners in shaping our AI entangled future. Young people and people are involved in AI have the right to participate and make critical choices and decisions as we determine what kind of future and what kind of technological world we want to have. They have unique experiences that contribute to the first generation, as you will see tomorrow. They are growing up surrounded by digitalization, by AI, in education, health, social lives, leisure, career prospects. We must include youth in all of our equations. So, with this in mind, I would like to say that everybody must understand that AI and digital challenge will impact everybody. And we must focus on education, mentorship, and create multi-stakeholder dialogue, which we're doing today. And I would now take the time to introduce my distinguished panelists from around the world. They're being represented here today by multiple countries that are coming in because of this initiative. I want to first introduce Reem Alatas. Reem is a techopreneur, inventor, NASA data nut, AI strategist, urban mobility enthusiast. She's an inventor and founder of Rumble Lights. She's the founder of Fitness Transformer, an online marketplace for fitness. She's been educated from University of Bridgeport and focusing on evolutionary modular robots, and has been one of the first female manager executives in Saudi Arabia. Ria Persad is our next panelist, president of European Chamber of Commerce, founder and CEO of Statweather, fellow of Cambridge Commonwealth Society. Ria was born in Trinidad and Tobago, East Indian descent, and moved to the United States as a child. She's both mathematician and a concert pianist. She mentors technology companies and is a climate scientist coordinating research teams globally. Ria was a space physicist at NASA, designed AI trading algorithms for Goldman Sachs, and has been in investment banking sector. She developed state-of-the-art based weather and climate prediction systems and has received citations from U.S. Secretary of Energy and U.S. Senate on scientific achievement, has been recognized by Platts Global Energy Awards as the top 7 global leader, was the International Power Gen and Renewable Energy Woman of the Year, is the president of European Chamber of Digital Commerce. And the next distinguished guest that we have, Monique Marot. Monique is based out of Zurich, Switzerland, a senior distinguished architect in emerging technologies at Suniverse Technologies, who is focused on social good and governance, on AI ethical usage, on the need for digital Hippocratic oath at the end of the day. She's also the chair of IEEE Ethics in Action Extended Reality Committee. She's in the company Suniverse Technologies. She's providing thought leadership and helping strategic direction and vision of Suniverse's identified emerging technologies. She has been focusing on distributed ledger technology and other emerging components of blockchain. Monique is the president and co-founder of Humanized Internet as a Swiss-based non-for-profit. She's also the president of Vetri Foundation. She's an active member, as I mentioned, in IEEE Ethics Executive Committee and the co-chair. Monique has been recognized for the industry for her tireless effort to focus on social good, holds 11 patents, has co-authored several books. Monique was selected as the top digital shaper 2018 in Switzerland. Forbes magazine listed Monique Marot as one of the top 50 women globally in technology. One World identified and recognized Monique as the top 100 influencers in identity, and the list goes on and on. And our organizer and the lady that does it all, Dalif Steiger, co-founder and managing partner, Swiss Cognitive, the global AI hub around the world. Award-winning platform, Swiss Cognitive, that she has co-founded with her partner, Andy. Prior to her entrepreneurial journey, she started 20 years ago. Dalif gained vast experiences in IT operations, banking software, advising management at the senior levels, as well as the board. Driven by her passion for cognitive technologies, Dalif, together with her co-founder, are committed to drive Switzerland towards competitive AI workforce for the future generation. In 2019, they have launched Cognitive Valley, And they also founded in May 2020 NGO Cognitive Valley Foundation. Dalif was named as the top 10 pioneering women in AI and machine learning and enterprise management, 360 London, and was elected as one of the top 100 digital shapers in Switzerland. We are also privileged to have Seth Bergeson, who comes to us from Seattle, representing World Economic Forum. He is the fellow at the World Economic Forum, responsible for AI, AI for children, and EdTech. He's focusing on leading Generation I project, focusing on AI governance and ethics for children. He leads World Economic Forum Generation AI project, which aims to leverage AI to educate and empower our children while protecting them from risks of technology. At PwC, Seth is a strategic consultant. He has worked across education, policy, public, and non-for-profit. Seth has developed global development strategies for the Gates Foundation, has worked at United States House of Representatives, and has been a Fulbright and Watson Fellow, actually produced significant research education reform in Bosnia-Herzegovina and childhood experiences around the world. Finally, we have an impressive guest, distinguished guest, Roberto Alvarez, Executive Director of Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils based in Washington, D.C. He is currently in Brazil. He's a recognized expert in international development and innovation. And he also is a researcher, scholar at Arizona State University. His group, JFCC, is a global network of 30 organizations around the world devoted to accelerating global competitiveness and prosperity. Roberto was the senior management of analysis and projects at Brazilian Agency for Industrial Development, and he has coordinated bilateral innovations with the United States, Sweden, and Germany, and has co-created C-level summits with the United States and Brazil. He currently sits on the board of Global Urban Development and is an angel investor and columnist in Brazil for different startups and technology. This is what we have to deliver to you today, and with this in mind, very quickly, I'll go to the general question, which I think will address all of the audience that is watching us around the world. What does this AI revolution mean for diverse countries and populations of Commonwealth versus what we're seeing in G20? And I'd like to pose this question first to Ria, please.
I think that AI and technology in general and digitalization actually helps to level the playing field for developing countries. Because really, now that we're all interconnected in this kind of globalized system, people in Africa, people in India, people in the United States, people in Europe can come together, can collaborate, can create solutions. We see entrepreneurship really emerging and actually exploding in areas that have traditionally been either developing or frontier markets. And so it's a wonderful thing for the people of the world. And what we're here to do today, Mark, as you have so eloquently introduced in your presentation just now, is that we're here to see how we can further this process and accelerate this process towards the greater good of humanity, and also to ensure that people in the Commonwealth or in developing nations can be capacitated and empowered in this new technology and in their own gifts and their own potential so that they can realize their own potential in their countries.
Thank you very much, Ria. I want to now go to Monique and ask another general question. The question is emerging technologies, which Ria, you're involved and have been for a lifetime. Advances in AI and developments are relevant, obviously, to Commonwealth and G20. But what are the specific innovations and advances that you think that are going to be the key enablers of this new digital economy in both Commonwealth and G20?
So I think that's a great question, Mark. I think basically what's very, very important in terms of actual development for in these technologies, specifically to artificial intelligence or AI, what I am looking at is a panoply, if you will, of various technologies. So they're not operating per se in a silo. whether they include, for example, you mentioned something that I am involved in, blockchain. If you're talking about also underpinning other technologies such as, I would say, security is one aspect of it. And so what I'm looking at, especially in the engagements I'm involved in, particularly in Africa, is that that the groups are pricing, for example, what should be the areas for regulation, what should be the areas for education, what can be from these countries that could be for these countries and adapted elsewhere, adopted, if you will, elsewhere. So, there are other issues that are very, very important, and that is also the issue around metadata and privacy. As you probably well know, I'm one person who's quite active in the ethical component of this discussion. And so from a general perspective, you have to look at it not just for artificial intelligence, it's also around the digitalization overall. And so countries like to start from their slate, which is very, very important. They don't want to, I think, from my observation, is that there is great opportunity to learn, I would say, learn from what they're doing in terms of innovation, education, and also the youth component of this discussion is very, very key.
Thank you very much, Monique. Both Rhea and Monique touched upon a very interesting point, the youth, the inventions, the entrepreneurship. And with this in mind, I'll jump to Reem, who is listening to this conversation and participating with now. I have a question for you. Reem, you have been a true inventor dedicated to harnessing technology to serve humanity. I opened Google Scholar, and you have offered so many impressive scholarly papers on robotics and mobility. It's not even funny. You are been involved in startups. That you've been involved in many entrepreneurial efforts in the kingdom and around the world. Your story is a story of all of the successful technology entrepreneurs, specifically women entrepreneurs. But what makes you passionate about those entrepreneurial causes? And give us lessons about young entrepreneurs that are getting into this world of technology and AI. How does entrepreneurship and a set of values become so critically important as a stepping block? We discussed it yesterday in the world of technology. So there are multiple questions. Feel free to jump to discuss this, but we're interested in this entrepreneurship as the building block for technology and AI.
Sure, absolutely. So with the rapid deployment of advanced technologies such as 5G, cloud computing, Internet of Things, automation, and AI, a new set of skills is required to enter the workforce. I'm talking here about the youth and young females especially. So next generation technologies are set to play a key role in accelerating digitalization and the impact of technologies such as AI. There is a huge need to include youth in all conversations on AI in sports, AI in arts, AI for space exploration, AI in transportation. So you don't want to focus on education only. You don't want to focus on education solely. You want to include educating AI in every aspect of the real life. In something similar to entrepreneurship, the startup of you, the startup of yourself, you should learn about the smallest skills in our life. So in order to reinforce the values, knowledge, and critical thinking skills among young people that should empower them to ask the right question, critically evaluate society, and thoughtfully lead the way into the future, we need to involve them in all conversations on technology, especially on AI and big data. And coming from a country, Saudi Arabia, where 70% of the population are under the age of 30, it made me, want to do something different. Okay, I worked in corporation, I worked in different startups, but I wanted to start my own business. And because I have a technical background, and everybody around me is talking about different new technologies, but I feel like AI, it's too hot in here and it's hard to focus. But AI has.
You're in the exciting part of the world, very competitive. So please go ahead.
Okay, cool. So, as you just mentioned, AI is called the new electricity. But unfortunately, we have only 14 AI researchers around the world who are females. So, in order to bridge this huge gap, I believe that governments, educational institutions, and companies should invest in talent by allowing females and younger generation to play an important role in how technology is used and developed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I want to jump to Dalif, that is listening to us and participating from Zurich. Dalif, you recently said something very interesting on Twitter, and I follow your Twitter. Thousands and millions of people follow you and Swiss Cognitive. And you said, while Hollywood movies and science fiction novels depict artificial intelligence as human-like robots that take over the world, the current evolution of AI technologies isn't that scary or unquiet, is actually smart. So if we talk about the positive aspect that Monique mentioned and Ria mentioned and just Reem alluded to, what are some of the interesting, relevant case studies, solutions that you are seeing, especially younger population getting involved in the AI and technology, that are providing relevant social impact, where you could actually see relevant ROI? And I leave it to you.
Mark. Yeah, there are a lot of use cases, and this is actually what we want to really focus on. We don't want to focus on leaders, on section. It's about how the technology can support the human being, can support us for having a life, and it goes fast. And we just mentioned it times. It's so important for the youth.
Mark, you
every session we're going to take
we will fix
is actually our generation. We're looking at where we do have different. You hear me?
Dalif, I apologize. There's some communication issues. We will come back. But at the meantime, I would like to, we will come back momentarily to Dalif, but I want to now take this opportunity now, as Dalif was addressing the issues of case studies, go to Roberto, who's patiently waiting for us in Brazil, and talk about the opportunities and gaps related to AI that you have been seeing globally. We're having a global conversation, especially at JFCC network, and maybe briefly address that. I know you have a story to tell, and as you do a lot of the programs around the world, but maybe briefly share some of the biggest opportunities and gaps that you are seeing.
Thank you, Mark. This is very exciting. So I think there's an AI conundrum. There are lots of opportunities, but there are also gaps that we need to fulfill. And what can we do with AI? I think that the biggest opportunity, it's really to accelerate and increase efficiency, not just efficiency of assets or different process, but efficiency of humanity. So we can enhance human capabilities with AI. We all know there are different things that are being done at this very moment as countries are fighting COVID-19. AI is being used to understand like the quality of the virus and the components that could really lead to new types of vaccines. Instead of working or using the whole virus, you can use specific proteins to develop a new vaccine. This is one thing that we can do and become more efficient in a way, but also society-wide, and having machines and algorithms working with humans to boost our own productivity. The flip side of that, I think the biggest gap that we have, it's really related to skills. I think this was mentioned earlier today. And there are three aspects that we need to focus on when we think about that, I believe. The first is that we already have a skills gap in the world. You mentioned that, Mark. The second thing is that technology is moving fast. So we need to get up to speed. We need to accelerate the development of skills. And finally, we need to do that at scale. That's a critical thing. Let me just finalize with a short note here, highlighting one opportunity and one, let's say, maybe a missing opportunity. In Germany alone, in 2030, it's clearly understood that if the skills gap is not properly addressed, the country will lose $100 billion per year because of that skills gap that is mostly related to digital technologies, including AI. And the good example, and I think that Ria mentioned that in the beginning, and you work together with us in several GFCC conversations. We have our Universal Research Leadership Forum, university presidents coming from 20 nations, where we were having a conversation about, hey, imagine the time when maybe we will not need to review an essay and grade an essay, and an algorithm would do that. And we had a university president from the UK talking with someone from Australia about that. And then I mentioned to them, hey, I know that solution that's being done now in a country like Brazil. And I think it's what Ria mentioned. In some way, it can also level the field. So big opportunities, the main challenge, skills.
We have another 15 minutes at the end.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Roberto. I think the situation with Dalif is better. And Dalif, we want to go back to you. And so you could finish your response on use cases, what you're seeing. Hello? Okay. So I think that hi, Dalif, can you hear us?
Let's go ahead with someone else.
Okay, so I think there's still challenges for, but we will fix them. We, meanwhile, want to now jump to our colleague at World Economic Forum, Seth. As I mentioned, he is the fellow focusing on the work of AI and children. And we're very curious about the issues, the urgent AI cases that require governance, and specifically governance targeting children that are involved in the world of AI and digitalization, like what we're seeing with TikTok and other digitalization immersive experiences. So maybe, Seth, you could talk a little bit about governance and some of the urgent AI use cases that you are seeing that do require governance from your perspective. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing on the Generation AI project as well at the World Economic Forum. To you, Seth.
Of course. Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure being here today, and thank you for the kind invitation. I think all the panelists are talking about similar issues, and I would add, to Roberto's point about the skills gap. I think there's a huge governance gap around AI around the world. You have a lot of countries who are developing AI strategies and policies at the national level. But AI obviously transcends borders, transcends regions. It's a global thing. So really, we need global governance standards to really regulate AI and ensure that it's used responsibly for positive social impact. And that's where the work of the World Economic Forum comes in. You have 90 to 100 different AI principles around the world. People generally agree on those principles, but it's very hard to go a level down and actually operationalize those principles where the rubber meets the road. And that's what we're trying to do on the AI ML platform at the World Economic Forum, where I work now as a fellow. And specifically, as you were saying, Mark, I lead the Generation AI project, which looks at children and youth and AI technology. So and there are 2 or 3 use cases we really are looking at right now in the Generation AI project. We're starting with smart toys, which are toys that children use and interact with that use AI to actually enhance that interaction. So they use voice recognition sometimes, or image or facial recognition to actually interact with the child. It's really exciting technology, and it's becoming more common and lower cost, so it's proliferating. But it often also has many different ethical concerns, including data privacy, bias and fairness, and behavioral and emotional manipulation. So we're thinking about smart toys, and we're actually working on a smart toy awards program right now. We'll launch early next year, where we will celebrate ethically and responsibly designed smart toys. The second use case we're thinking a lot about is education. And in COVID-19, where 1.6 billion students and learners around the world were not able to attend school, a lot of people who have access to internet and a device, it's definitely not all youth around the world, and there's a huge digital divide that we really need to address, both from the private sector as well as through government and public policy. But you see a lot of children embracing education technology online. So that's the second use case. And the third use case, which is kind of overarching, you alluded to this with TikTok, is content recommendations and algorithms. Because because children and youth, especially youth under 7, are really vulnerable to the content that's being pushed at them through TikTok, YouTube Kids. We want to ensure that that content is, ethical and responsible, and really enhances childhood and education and doesn't detract from that.
Thank you very much, Seth. This was very powerful work that you're involved in the World Economic Forum, especially giving our youth that global perspective and bringing this data set of knowledge from all the companies and all the policymakers and making a point that they do matter, and there's a lot of learning that has to be done. So thanks for this. I want to go back now to Ria. Ria, we started discussing, I think that Roberto started focusing on skills and competencies. Maybe you could talk about some of the key competencies and skills that are needed to propel our younger population into the future, especially in leveraging AI and emerging technologies.
There are a set of skills and competencies in terms of leveraging AI and technology and helping that emerging technology to propel forward that are more commonly associated with AI, such as mathematics and computer science, and even perhaps experience with engineering for specific applications like robotics and so on. But then there are the skills that we don't necessarily associate with AI, but yet it's absolutely essential for the advancement of technology and also for individuals to be able to advance in the field. And these skills are scientific communication. This is something that is a real lack. We think of kind of the geeky person or the nerdy person sitting there just geek speaking at you, and people don't understand what they're talking about or what the technology is about. So then there's also the entrepreneurial savvy. So how do I actually take a technology to market? And then there would be education in the broader context. How does AI impact our society? What are we actually doing? What kinds of problems are out there that we really need to solve on a societal level where AI can help? So these are things that are outside the scope. Another skill would be innovative thinking. What do we need to do to really channel our own creativity and innovation in these fields? Because it's not just math, but there's a lot of creativity in terms of the applications, in terms of the things we're trying to solve. It's a left brain, right brain type of thing. And so all of this will be completely vital more and more as we go forward into the millennial generation and even beyond.
Thank you very much, Ria. With this in mind, you mentioned creativity. You mentioned that it's about ideas, but they have to be delivered in a way where we're capturing the hearts and minds of people around the world, not only bits and bytes. And with this, I want to go to our colleague in Reem in Saudi Arabia, and just to put this in perspective, the president of Saudi Arabia, Microsoft, recently said that we're moving into a time where the world's economy is powered by ideas and creativity. Exactly what Ria said. Dubbed the creative economy, this era will be based on people's use of their creative imagination to increase the idea of values and creativity. What does digital transformation, the digital creative economy, mean to you, to the younger people, Gen Z? What does it mean for Saudi Arabia, especially with the Vision 2030? To you, Reem.
A new and a huge opportunity in front of us. Unfortunately, when you mention Saudi Arabia, people say, oh, oil, but no, we need actually to change this image, and we need people to think about technology aspects, technology startups, technology initiatives that Saudi Arabia has made. So they can remember Saudi Arabia when discussing technology. I believe today, during the pandemic, where everybody is suffering with education and going to school, we need to see more strong applications of AI in the education sector in terms of digital tutors, online platforms that can improve content, reduce costs, and other barriers to education, and enhance educational outcomes. Digital transformation should continue to bring new opportunities for all of us when it comes to education, in terms of enhanced learning, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to access. For example, instead of going to a court to file some legal papers, you can do it on your phone nowadays. So digital transformation is offering us more flexible pathways.
Thank you very much, Reem, for that perspective. Digital transformation is indeed providing us flexibility. And as Ria mentioned, we are a creative species. We have 90 billion neurons. We're not using probably 5 to 10% of it. How could we now go and scale our potential now in the future? AI allows us to do this across the world, in Commonwealth, the G20 countries, Saudi Arabia, United States, United Kingdom, Africa, and others. And with this in mind, we're talking about this social innovation. We're talking about this good that AI is bringing, where the United Nations has been talking a lot about it, is hosting a number of conferences. In fact, UN is represented very heavily today as people are listening around the world. AI can certainly be a force of good, and it does. As Monique recently said, it allows us to address critical issues more urgently than ever before. But we have to make social impact of AI a core consideration, not a sideshow, not an afterthought. So, Monique, what are some of the advances in social impact in AI that you've been talking for years that are critical for the world now, and for people at the United Nations and all of the NGOs and organizations to hear us loud and clear?
Technology has no agency. So when we're talking about social good, and I think this is really important, especially for the generations where we are speaking with, this is going to be around, how do we deal with, for example, the use of AI in issues around climate. I think that's one example that's very, very important. How do we deal with that? Or I was in Hyderabad a year ago, and we were talking about the uses of AI for looking at agriculture and agricultural changes in terms of seeds, and etc. So these become sort of a social good aspect of it that we have to build upon. One of the things that we've been talking about throughout this whole discussion is around the issues of governance, and I think that what's very, very critical when we talk about social good, and I know that Dalit has very, very pertinent examples of social good, especially in terms of medicine and so on, pharmaceutical issues and these examples, is the issue around responsible use. And this goes to the topic of governance. This goes to the topic of teaching from the very beginning ethics. What is good? What is for good mean from the beginning when you are either dealing with robotics, or you're dealing with quantum computing aspects, or whatever the emerging technology of the day is. We have to think about ethics from the beginning. I think it's very interesting that ethics is becoming sort of trendy at this point in time, looking at what cognitive bias may be. But ethics, if you look at it, was really historically with physics. And so we have to challenge ourselves. What is the red line of use here? Anything that crosses that red line, could be potentially harmful. Hence, therefore, why I have been advocating for a digital Hippocratic oath that we should be adhering to in education and what we develop from the very, very, very beginning. This is the call to any of the policymakers that we are speaking to through this program today, Mark.
Thank you very much, Monique. Monique addressed it really succinctly, and she pointed out that ethics it's a good life. It's the way the life should be, but we have to be very careful on how this information coming in from AI platforms is being presented, whether this information is representative of all of us, all inclusive, represents women, men, boys, and girls of all races, of all kinds, all religions, or it is divisive, and it is specifically very parochial. So we have to address the societal good issue from ethical perspective. Very, very important. But with this in mind, I want to go back to Dalit once again. in beautiful Zurich. I know that in Zurich and in Switzerland, things work like a clock. Sometimes hiccups occur. But with this in mind, Dalev has an interesting story to tell us about some of the innovations and case studies that she's seeing in social impact, and then she wants to share with the audience. Go ahead, Dalev.
And this is always what I'm laughing about, talking about robots going to take over the globe. It was basic technology issues. And yes, I think the whole discussion of the ethical aspects around AI is essential. And this is one of the things that we're seeing as Russia. It's a new trade. We have the possibility to have
It's not gonna work.
the whole
We have
discussion.
to stop her.
Thank you, Dalev. Thank you very much for this. Let's go now to Roberto. Roberto is joining our conversation, and we want to take this conversation to education, digital education in the time of COVID-19. So I alluded to this in my opening. So lockdowns and social distances measures have deeply impacted universities. Roberto, you were talking about this and tweeting about this just recently. Education rapidly went online as the sectors adopted. They had no choice. They had to adapt to the changing environment. Sometimes it is a hybrid. Sometimes it is much more than a hybrid. It's direct digital connectivity. What role do you expect AI and advanced technologies to play, and how will it disrupt education for our youth? And what are you seeing in places like Brazil and around JFCC community?
So, as you said, we made a lot of progress recently in terms of using digital technologies and AI. We saw education going online, but also in other fields of life, right? We saw an acceleration of 10 years in 2 months in terms of e-commerce penetration across countries, several countries. I think that in terms of education, we should break that down in different levels, and some of the things were already mentioned here. The first thing is that we need to start early. So working with children and teaching them how to engage, or creating the opportunities for them to engage with technology, is a clear trend that we see around the globe. We just finalized in the GFCC a benchmark of future skills initiatives, or initiatives to develop future skills. And one of the very clear trends that we've seen is this: start early, work with children as early as possible. Second thing, we need to, in some way, address the gaps that we have in society today for people who already are in the workforce. So, and this connects back to, I think, that this very important topic of governance, but also the knowledge that people need to have. We need to empower people to work with AI. So this is something that it's critical, especially as we have more and more systems making decisions. At one level, we need to work on the frameworks and the standards, as Seth mentioned, but we also need to empower people who are on the ground using those technologies to make judgments, to understand what's behind that, and maybe not just to take results for granted, especially as we're in the beginning. And finally, in terms of, we need to really, education is, we have the opportunity to use adaptive learning and to provide education to certain parts and demographics that maybe today do not have access. We're surely seeing a big shift in higher education at this moment in the globe. Actually, one of the initiatives that we have is to create a future vision for University 4.0, or the technology-enabled university. So this is a critical conversation. We need to systematize the learnings and the things that we're seeing that are working and not working. As you said, Mark, it's very clear that we also need, especially in higher education, this human touch, human component. And this is something that I think is an open question going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roberto. Let's stick to education. You have the most at stake because of all of this. It does provide valuable experiences, and it is transformative. And they need to be able to be in control of the digital future. Education will provide this, but now education itself is being reinvented. As Roberta was saying, it's being reinvented by on the classroom level. We're seeing major universities like Harvard, which are changing their curriculum now because of the crisis on what's going on. So AI and digital transformation really has a major say in this crisis. I want to now go back to Seth for some of his perspective on digital education and the impact that it has immersively, not only with AI, but video conferencing and all of the online platforms and technologies that are making it possible for our youth to participate and be educated, be part of the conversation. Could you please share what are some of the greatest positive impact that you have seen on digital education, and maybe some of the AI solutions that you have seen that impact the children and youth?
Of course, Mark. And I mean, COVID has provided a really interesting crisis and also opportunity in digital education. So as I was saying before, with 1.6 billion people out of school during COVID-19, for those people who were fortunate enough to have access to broadband internet and a device, they were able to go online and use a lot of free resources for free education technology resources. And there are some great smaller niche companies doing amazing work with what other panels have been talking about, adaptive learning and curriculum. So what's really exciting about this step change is people have really been embracing digital education and education technology. Is that I don't think we would have seen this kind of level of adoption if it were not for COVID. But at the same time too, a lot of people thought that COVID-19 was going to be a great equalizer, but in fact, it is a great divider, where we are seeing a digital divide amongst children who have access to devices and internet and those who do not, and those who have access to higher quality education technology and those who do not. So I think through policy in the private sector, we need to make sure that everyone has access to high quality education technology. But it's really this adaptive learning curriculum that puts within reach a personalized education for everybody on the planet who has internet access and a device, because this is a smart curriculum that can learn from the student, learn about their strengths and shortcomings and areas for improvement. And this is really, really extraordinary. But as Roberto was talking about, we really do need to think about the role of the human in education going forward. We are certainly not at the World Economic Forum advocating an automation of education. We really see, in the future after COVID-19, we see technology being used to augment teaching in the classroom to assist the teacher, kind of like a smart teaching assistant. And for students who do not have access to traditional classrooms now during COVID or after COVID, education technology really puts a high quality personalized education within reach, which is great. In closing, I just wanted to echo what other panelists are talking about too. It's really important to educate children about AI technology from a young age, but also to start with as Monique was saying, to start with education about responsible use of AI and how the technology can be used safely, and what are some of the strengths and benefits, and what are some of the risks as well. So I think starting there is a really strong basis for students to be successful in their educations and also in their future professional careers.
Thank you, Steph. Steph, if you stay a little bit with me, what are some of the solutions, maybe in your group or other groups at the World Economic Forum, some startups or solutions that you have seen in digital education that is extremely helpful to the kids and possibly even Gen Z and others that are involved in the education process? Can you share some interesting, unique solutions that you came across with our audience?
Oh, of course. I mean, so there's some amazing, free applications out there. There's an education tool called Bedtime Math, which is designed for very young children and helps them go to bed while thinking about math problems. It's really quite fascinating. There's actually a peer-reviewed article about the impact of that technology, which is fascinating. Not every piece of education technology is going to have a peer-reviewed journal article behind it to back it up, but we are really advocating at the World Economic Forum for companies to really be clear and explicit with the data about the impact of their technology. Another company that comes to mind is Century Technology in the UK. It's run by Priya Lakhani, who's a close colleague of ours at the World Economic Forum. platform. And she's doing really wonderful work, but is really focusing on data privacy and ethics, and is being very deliberate with how they protect student data and anonymize it in aggregate, which is really fascinating. So it's great to see people like her really pushing this forward. She's also making an effort too to make the technology very affordable and accessible in developing and middle income countries. So yeah, there's really extraordinary stuff happening. We're probably going to see a consolidation of these smaller niche players too, as big tech sees this opportunity in education technology, which is both a strength and a challenge to an extent.
Thank you very much, Seth. Seth addressed a lot of the solutions that are appearing in the market, and some of them are early on, but they're shaping or reshaping the younger minds and allowing them to participate and being part of this conversation. And with this, I'm jumping to Ria again for her perspective on next generation. So let's talk about the youth, talking about our kids and how are they being educated. If we talk about the specific skill sets, the specific areas of improvement, and not only skill sets, the ethics, as Seth was mentioning and Reem was talking about, what are the preparations and the roadmap that is necessary for the journey of the future for the younger population on this planet?
Incredible question about the journey for the future for young people on this planet. I think that the number one skill going forward for young people would be actually in terms of entrepreneurship and being able to take their knowledge and their technological skill set to the public, and what it takes to actually be what we'd say income earning, profitable. Something that we've seen with the European Chamber of Digital Commerce is that we can have great technology, but if it's not meeting the needs of the people, or if the people who are creating that technology for whatever reason cannot monetize on it out there, then that technology can actually kind of go into the shadows. And we see startups with great ideas, having to take a back seat, and it never really materializes because of something on the entrepreneurial side. So I think that just the people skills and also business skills, those kinds of things will be great going forward. And it's also because we see that there are some economic shifts as well, especially in light of COVID-19. And we see that the jobs that used to exist no longer might be there. So people are in this kind of gig or freelance economy, or maybe they're in this type of a mode where, hey, I have a great idea. I have something that can really help people, so I want to get it out there. So I think that those kind of business skills are going to be more and more important for young people, and also that they can have a kind of global awareness of what's needed and the application. So for example, in universities, a question that I often get is, well, what can I use AI for? I'm learning all of this theoretical stuff. I'm learning linear algebra and calculus and blah, blah, blah. But what do I do with all of it? And sometimes in academia, the real world applications are not explicit. They're not necessarily given to them in their university classes, but yet undergraduate and graduate students really want to know, what am I going to do with this when I graduate? And so it's really in the practical realm, I think we need to focus on for the future.
A great point illustrated to us, Ria. Those points are emphasizing that skills of listening, the business skills early on, entrepreneurship early on, learning how to become an entrepreneur, whether you're building a new game or you're in esports, in the virtual sector, and you're trying to do a lesson or a lecture for somebody. Those skills, that combining the digitalization and entrepreneurship, are so critical, and especially listening and then applying it in our universities, our great universities around the world, and in the United States, UK, Commonwealth. It's a lot of core research. But what the next generation, the Gen Z, has shown us, that you need more applied capabilities very early on, so people could immediately step in and solve a problem. Because, as Roberto is saying, it's all about challenges, and it's all about solving those problems and challenges, not only at the research level, but on our business world, our social world, our political world, whatever whatever kids grow up to be, they have to be able to solve problem, find information very quickly. And with this in mind, we had this conversation just literally yesterday with Monique, and you mentioned several times, Monique, and also in some of the articles that you have distributed, is that STEM has to be more inclusive space, meaning that it has to bring more women into the space, other genders. It has to be more representative, the world of STEM. But it also, as Ria was talking about, entrepreneurship is very early on. So how do you converge the world of STEM of entrepreneurship? But yesterday we discussed mentorship. You brought on mentorship, so important, and mentorship brings you that so strong sense of community, especially for the younger crowd, where you don't necessarily need to be in an Ivy League school in Stanford or Harvard to be part of the Ivy League club. You could develop your own community and your own respective network. So the question that I have for you and for that the audience around the world would love to hear is why mentorship early on is so critical for the development and growth of our youth, and especially in the areas which we're discussing today, which is digital and AI. And how do you develop those business networks and that global engagement in the world of STEM?
Sure, Mark, that's a wonderful question. And as we did discuss yesterday, I do believe I want to distinguish mentorship and coaching, and I do believe in reverse mentorship, if you will. Let me give you an example. But let's break it down a little bit. We have STEM. You have stellar women, by the way, on this panel. I'm humbled to be with them. So they are wonderful examples of what is possible. But I'll give you concrete examples. I have worked with a 13-year-old girl, a 16-year-old girl, where they have developed their own businesses, and really before they've gone into either high school or college. And I've been sort of their CIO or CIO kind of person representing them. They have really gravitated to trying to look at problems they want to solve with, particularly in the robotics area, which has been quite interesting. They've been working on that, and I have been learning from them. So I think this is really, really important. I'm very, very excited about what I see in youth, and that partnership is really synchronous. It's a synchronous partnership. So while I think it's great to say, look, reach out and say, would you be my mentor, but would you also be sort of a coach? But it is a reverse, it has to be working both ways. And so in my particular case, I believe in that reverse dialogue. So, learning from the 13-year-old girl and the 16-year-old girl who come from various parts of the world and who are so creative, with their own businesses. The other part I want to bring to play here, which was catching some of the conversations, is around problem solving, especially as part of the mentoring and coaching experience. I note that what works very well is if you bind a problem to be solved, whether it's in the form of some kind of hackathon or something that's time bound, you would be so surprised of the solutions that come forward out of the result of that. I've been part of that kind of experience. And so, yes, this is important. Reach out to your network. It's very important to do that early, but bear in mind, I'm going to be one that's going to be learning from that other person. The last thing I will say, because we were talking about the human and skills component of it, the earlier part, is these two girls, one of them, her parents were very concerned that she was really getting too in-depth into the technology part and forgetting about her communications aspect. And what we actually said was, there was not a pressure from the parents for her to be so technical. But what I advised this particular, person, because I'm on her board, is to take a theater improvisation course, because that's how you start to think about not forgetting about your essential communications at the end of the day. But anyway, that's very important. Is think about reverse mentoring from the very beginning, and think about it in a coaching relationship.
I agree completely with Monique. The relationship, it's a it's a bidirectional relationship, and it's a relationship where we learn from each other. And this is why in the world of digitalization and AI, people tend to learn more from the peers. It's a peer-to-peer community. It's a peer-to-peer networking. It's not a consultant or advisor. It's the peers that actually give you the strength and empower you with knowledge and education. And I also think that problem solving, creativity, again, listening, be able to listen more to the younger voices and then provide solid wisdom advice has to be the way of the future if we're going to solve problems. We see those problems as Monique alluded to in climate change, what Greta is doing and how she is evangelizing and invoking the strength of the younger population to solve one of the most difficult challenges and the problem of climate change when people only are waking up. And so this is the future, and getting more empowerment of women and the young leaders and our Gen Z community. So with this in mind, I want to jump to Reem to talk about what are you seeing in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that could be could be lessons for the youth around the world to do more, to have more younger people to be involved, more female leaders to be involved in STEM and AI. And the follow-up question to you, Reem, is how do we scale the AI skills development, very specifically on AI in younger people? How do we make them excited about this and create new entrepreneurial projects like you did in fitness tracking and digital health? What could we do, and how do we encourage them on some illustrative examples? To you, Reem.
Sure. So to address the first part of your question, I believe that role models in tech, role models in AI who are pursuing diverse career paths, not only in technical companies, but also in other companies that relate to sports, to arts, to education, should visit schools, should visit local communities to empower millions of young girls and boys, young people in general worldwide, to find purpose in their life, first of all, and also to make sure that those young children, those young people have access to technology, have access to mentorship, and therefore have a voice and a platform to discuss how technology develops. They can discuss also new ideas, new challenges, things that we see on a daily basis that we did not even think of as a problem, and propose a solution for it. And that's what I did with Rumble. I remember the idea for Rumble came when I was living in Connecticut, and my roommate had an accident because she was riding her bike and the car driver did not see her. So I thought, hey, why not we just add some light signaling system to the helmet so it's going to be on the eye level and people can see it. And here we go. Now we have a company that is called Rumble Helmet. Now it's called Rumble Lights. So I think we should work on establishing a global initiative towards gender inclusive, towards including the youth, in order to arm young people with tools needed to create startups, to solve problems, to make a contribution to the transformation ahead of us. And how do we make things exciting for children? By showing them role models, by using storytelling, by showing them, hey, okay, I use this technical aspect to solve a problem that you guys are facing now. For example, in your classroom, try to use simple language to make it appealing for a young generation. Try to use their language. Try to use also role models from their age group. You don't need to bring an executive from a company, for example. You can bring a teenager who started a company and let that person share his story or her story with their peers in order to give them a motivation to pursue such a career.
Thank you, Reem, for this inspiration to thousands and millions of people that need to pursue similar examples. And I fully agree. Sometimes it's just a challenge. It becomes, how do you solve a puzzle? I remember in early days growing up in very underprivileged communities, and creating my own program, programming something and coming up and demonstrating this in the science fair and saying, listen, this is so unique. And people came about and said, Mark, how does this work? And then you become so interested that you start learning on how microprocessors and how the Boolean logic works and all of this. This is very exciting, and I think a great examples for our youth and what they need to do. And I want to jump again. We keep trying, and I'm sure that we will get it right. And now I want to see if we could connect to Dalif again.
Yeah, I hope I'm back again.
Yes, we could hear you, Dalif. You know, you're back, and and it's great to hear your voice, Dalif. As we started this conversation, you started talking about some interesting case studies that you're seeing, initiatives and solutions of your work in Swiss Cognitive and Cognitive Valley. Can you share with us some of those things that are producing social impact?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we see what is most important is really sharing the knowledge and experience about the real use cases. Where can we really implement cognitive technology? How can we scale up our businesses? How can we do our services and our products smarter? And this is one of the things that we see here and that we can share, especially within medical health, where we can see how the cognitive technology can support the human being, make our lives easier, healthier, and especially now the COVID time, we saw how a lot of startups and also enterprises started actually to develop different kind of use cases, how you can actually detect the distance between people, how you can detect where people touches more and where less, how you can actually benefit from this data and evaluate all this different data to make sure that people are aware and are alerted to do or not to do certain things. And I think also a lot of use cases that we see all around the 17 sustainable goals of the UN, what refers to poverty, that, for example, we have use cases seen within sugarcane, the harvest. How can you support those farmers with satellite picture analyzing the data? When should they actually bring their harvest to the mill? How can we make sure that they don't lose a lot of their production? So there are a lot of different use cases that we can see in health, in agrotech, not only in the areas of economy. And one of the things that for us it's most important is how can we actually engage between AI for good and AI for economy? How can we make sure that those two sectors are encouraging and empowering each other, especially for the future generations?
Dalif just gave us a glimpse. They have a strong database, but they gave us a glimpse of foundational solutions that exist today for the world of tomorrow. And those solutions are focusing on the AI for good. And we have a big issue that I think Dalif was alluded to. The world of technology, especially in the United States, has focused for a long time on efficiencies and lifestyle improvements. But the shift is occurring. For the people that are listening us in Commonwealth and other countries across the world, people are focusing on societal problems. Does transportation really work? Can AI be helpful with crowd control? Can we keep our loved ones healthy? Do our emergency systems really work? Does triaging really work, or we need AI to get in there to triage the patients instead of when you go to areas where somehow the disadvantaged people from a community are not getting through or not getting the treatment that they need? All of those are societal issues that need to be addressed by societal innovation converged with AI. And I don't want to lose you, Dalif. I know that Switzerland is always active like a Swiss clock. But while we have you, I want to ask you another question. and you've been thinking through this, businesses and industries that you're seeing through Swiss Cognitive and around the world, they find relevance now in digital economy. They find a bigger cause. People are sensing that now might be a digital first generation, a digital first push like never before. What transformations specifically are you seeing, and where are you seeing those transformations under the COVID-19? Can you talk a little bit about some of those transformations impacting people, impacting youth, impacting healthcare, education, and everything? Where are those transformation happenings, and what could you mention about it?
Thanks a lot. I mean, besides obviously in the subject of healthcare and pharma, where we see a lot of use cases, what I would like to emphasize even more is that through COVID-19, we got a huge push forward. People somehow started to trust into technology where at the start they didn't. Parents were happy that their kids had connectivity, were able to use certain sessions to follow their teachers. So we had discussion about connectivity, about bandwidth, about devices, giving the kids the devices, the laptops, being able to connect with the world out there. A lot of companies had to struggle about home offices. So it's not only about using it to the benefit of our health, that obviously was implemented and still is being driven a lot through COVID-19, is a lot about gaining trust into technology, realizing that we're talking about iterative process, how we can develop, how we can do things better, that it's not a plug and play, it's not about, okay, we have here an application and I just want to use it, it must work. It doesn't. It is something that, especially between the IT and the business, needs to have a close collaboration, needs to have an open discussion about where we want to go to. And I think that through COVID-19, we have been pushed out of a comfort zone, everyone here, and we also have been obliged to think about the chances that we have. So for me, this is one of the most important things, especially towards the youth again, who are in the center of our discussion today. And I think it's a lot about the old economy, guys and women, as well as myself, that we have to rethink what we're doing, that we have really to think in their perspective, how can we use the cognitive technology, the digitalization, the emerging technology towards a better economy and a more healthy life.
Thank you very much, Dalif, for this perspective. I want to go to Roberto for one final question, and then my distinguished panelists will have opportunity to share their final closing thoughts and action items that they want the policymakers and they want people that are listening to our conversation from Commonwealth and around the UN system and around the world. They want that to be implemented so it would be a better digital world for our kids. And they want to make sure that all of us, if we take control of our digital future and we can, under proper circumstances, and respond effectively to the disruptions that it is causing, and disruptions that this awful pandemic has caused to all of us and all of our lives and our people and our families, some of the families who lost their lives. But we want to lay the foundation that technology will bring the better days and lay a foundation for the digital world, which will be promising and address the social agenda for this world. So as our panelists are thinking about this, I'll be asking Roberto one final question, and then we'll go for the closing statements. So Roberto, you recently mentioned that technology is allowing for digitalization of labs and enabling research to assume new forms, becoming globally distributed now. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be sitting in Montana, you could be sitting in Mozambique or Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and all of this is globally distributed. Welcome to the global village, H, you said. Can you expand this thinking to our audience?
But before I do that, I just want to highlight one thing that you mentioned and others comment here about the crisis. So the crisis that we're going through is one accelerator. We all talked about that, and we are seeing that, but it also is a highlighter, especially a highlighter of the weaknesses that we have in society, the weaknesses that we have in infrastructures. So addressing that will be critical going forward. Having said that, when we think about digitalization research, the hard part of that is really things that are related to hard sciences that require a lab, a wet lab sometimes, that is being partially digitalized. But here again comes this issue about infrastructures. And I think that Seth mentioned that in the education context. The same thing applies to the research context. In places where you have more access to resources and infrastructures, that's easier to do, and that's being done. So that can be done to a certain level, but we need to be cognizant there's a gap related to infrastructures that we need to address going forward. And if maybe Mark, should I bundle my final comment here, or
Yeah, please start with the final comment with you. We start the final comments with you as we have you now, and then we'll jump to the rest of our panelists. So please, Roberto. And by the way, it's a pleasure to have you with us joining from Brazil.
Yeah, wonderful to be here, Mark. I think that the second thing it really is we need deliberate efforts. And I think they're related to two things. First is to demystify, translate, and inspire people on AI. At the same time, we need to provide some education on knowledge on what is that, because we need to understand the limits of AI. And at the same time, there's a need to educate governments and organizations around the globe. So to translate, we just heard from Daleth and others about concrete examples. How can we use AI? So demystify, translate, and inspire. The other part of that, we need to address the gap. And I think that if we could frame this in a more general sense, and some of you mentioned that, in some way we need to make a decision if we're putting people around the globe in the asset column or in the liabilities column of our social balance sheet. So, and that will be really related, and I think Monique mentioned that, how we're making this, turning this AI for good in practice. What are the frameworks? And that relates to like this, the gaps that we have. And just to finish, how can we do that? I think the Reen mentioned that, and others about entrepreneurship. And I'll give you one final example. If we compare Italy and Brazil, the scientific research that's being done in those two countries related to AI in terms of peer-reviewed papers, from consider the IP, the knowledge generated in Italy related to AI, most of that it's being connected to concrete implementations in the United States. That's great. That's understandable. United States, the largest economy in the world, and Italy comes second in terms of turning knowledge into concrete solutions. When we look at that in Brazil, say what's being generated in terms of research mostly can be tracked and traced to implementations in the United States, but Brazil only ranks 8th in terms of turning knowledge that's being produced in an AI into concrete solution. What is that gap about? Entrepreneurship, business skills, and mindsets. So we need to address also those things to turn knowledge that's being generated into concrete opportunities. I'll finish here.
Thank you very much. Roberto, for a call to action. And the next call to action, Ria, please. I'm sure you are waiting to share your opportunities that you see. What could be done? What could the UN Secretary General do? And what can governments and policymakers, entrepreneurs, everybody that is listening, what action items that we need to now to further the agenda of digitalization for the youth?
I believe that a main takeaway from this entire panel can be summed up in one word, which is collaboration. We need to see a more integrated ecosystem of policymakers, the technologists, private industry, the startups, the academic sector, the nonprofits, government organizations. We need to be talking to each other. We need to be communicating with each other, because what we see is that if we're all siloed into our individual worlds, and if we're not really communicating and opening that lines, then each of these silos are ignorant about the others: academia, policymakers, the business people. So we need to create more and more mechanisms where we can come together and collaborate and have a more vibrant ecosystem. And that interdisciplinary approach is really what's going to propel us into our future in an ideal manner.
Thank you very much, Ria. I really like this interdisciplinary approach and a collaboration. And with this, to Monique for her closing thoughts and actions that you would like to suggest for our community and policymakers and others. And you have the your amazing experience on social innovation and technology, traveling and spending time around the world. We want to hear from you, Monique, on inspiring and taking what is the takeaway that the world needs to hear?
Yeah, so building upon what Ria had stated, and Alberto, I think that fundamentally what we want to have, it is multi-stakeholder at the end of the day. We should be building and agreeing as collective nations and countries on a AI governance framework. I think globally that should be something that we should be able to take action on. This gets into defining responsible use of AI, and also this whole notion of a digital Hippocratic oath, if you will. The other component of this is to let's see if we can have AI ethics competency centers that may be dispersed within various continents and countries that where it would involve youth as well as teachers, as well as folks from private industry and so on. I think that would be fantastic. Thinking of also creating a regulatory tech sandbox, if you will, with regard to AI. And the last point I want to state, which is more to be very, I think, inspirational, is for the youth to create this world they wish to have and not the one they wish to avoid, using AI and AI responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monique. Now we're going to Reem for closing thoughts, and maybe if you have also the entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial spirit, DNA that is part of you, how do we instill it, and what's the takeaway for the rest of the world?
Community to attract newcomers, whether in AI, in entrepreneurship, in tech in general, introduce and advance skills, and create a vibrant problem-solving community.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Reem. We're now going to Seth, and your perspective on behalf of World Economic Forum and everything that you have done for the kids immersing in AI and digitalization. What else could be done, and what else would you encourage the world's community to do?
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you to all the panelists for this fascinating discussion. Just trying to pull together so many different threads. I think we know that AI is not human, but AI has very human impact, which I think we're seeing. We're also seeing that AI reflects human bias and also a lot of bias in data. So I think we need to address that. I think it's clear that we need to focus fundamentally on human rights, and I would say start with children's rights because they are our most vulnerable. And it also seems like we need to think about a way to really quantify the social impact that AI is having. And I think this really involves, as we would say at the forum, a focus on stakeholder capitalism and a move away from just focusing on shareholder value. We really need to think about the impact that business practices, capitalism, all of our actions have on the broader community. And I think we need to have some kind of framework for how we think about AI. I wanted to echo Monique thinking about a comprehensive AI framework and a digital Hippocratic oath that people can agree to. There's not a lot of unification of all these AI ethics principles around the world, so I think we need to start there. And I would say we also really need to, I think, start with education and really start at a young age with education on responsibly using AI, and also thinking about how we can upskill and reskill youth so they can leverage AI in the future. It's been so great to hear this talk about mentorship and engaging youth. It's something we're doing at the World Economic Forum. We're putting together an AI Youth Council of youth who can really partner with us to help us co-develop our governance frameworks. We think it's absolutely hypocritical to be talking about youth and children without engaging them in the discussion. And lastly, I want to talk about the digital divide. And I think we really need to focus on equity and ensure that AI can lift all young people and adults around the world up, as a unifying force, and not continue to divide. And this involves the private sector making investments, collaborating with the public sector through policies and incentives. And really, it's with a multi-stakeholder approach that we can really move this forward and create a better future. But we really need to do this for our children and youth, because they're going to be leading us out of future crises in the coming years and decades.
Thank you very much, Seth, for this insight and this positive perspective about the multi-stakeholder approach that you are engaging at the World Economic Forum, engaging the youth, engaging the kids, so they are better prepared for the new world that is coming to them, and encouraging the all-inclusive society and strategic frameworks that Ria, Monique, and others have alluded to. And so we finally have the closing statements from our panel organizer, Daleth, and her team. So Daleth, to you on action items and your takeaways from this call. And meanwhile, we thank everybody that has listened and participated actively, all of our amazing panelists, organizations around the world. It's been an incredible experience for me personally, and very motivating to hear those experiences which are action-oriented, which are thought-provocative, and which include the best of that AI world could bring to us. And with this in mind, to you, Daleth, for the closing statements.
Okay, Dalit is out. Please take over.
Okay, I believe that there are probably, again, technical issues that are happening there again, but I am sure, and speaking on behalf of Swiss Cognitive and Daleth, that they are excited on the issues that came out in terms of sharing use cases, a multi-stakeholder approach, and ability to convey those powerful images and powerful messages to inspire our youth as they will be leading the next generation, and have AI as the force of positive good on social innovation and creation, and giving them the right education, the right opportunities in schooling, and making sure that they're properly immersed with entrepreneurship and ability to be exposed to AI at the early level. So I think that was a fantastic panel. And I'm very excited to have moderated this. And I want to now bring this back to our amazing hosts that are hosting the rest of the Commonwealth program from AI Policy and other organizations. Back to you. We enjoyed it. Thank you for having us.
That's a brilliant panel. Sorry, I think I was on mute. Oh, okay, we lost people here. Dalit, are you there? Swiss Cognitive? I think we've lost you.
Yeah, I'm here. Mark is here, so I'm listening, and we enjoyed this panel and had a great conversation. Thank you for giving us opportunity. And, you are doing some exciting things on behalf of the Commonwealth and the United Nations, and especially the AI policy, the Global Policy Insights, and all of the organizations, the Ramphal Institute that participated. And hope you had were listening, and we're happy to engage the world to make it a better, more digital place.
Brilliant, Mark. Well, thank you very much. What a brilliant panel we had, and superb moderation. Initially started off like an inspirational talk. It did sound like a very, your tone has got some inspiration in it, even before you got to the content. And I particularly like your style as well. It was a brilliant panel. Thank you so much, Mark and Dalit and Swiss Cognitive for these brilliant panelists and the excellent message that has gone out as part of this panel. Thank you, Mark.
We'll be listening for the rest of it. We wish you all the best.
So if you hold on, Dalit, I just wanted to discuss a couple of points for the excellent work that you're doing through Swiss Cognitive. Tomorrow you